thanks for coming on and having a chat. So I think,
My pleasure.
I mean, anyone that's been to one of the global retail conferences or anything is probably knows of who you are. And I think I've known of you at least for a decade that I can remember. And we've only recently gotten to know each other a bit better in recent times. So I think my first question for you is just a bit about your background. So for people that don't know who you are, can understand a bit more about that and what you're mainly involved in now.
Yeah, so, geez, how far back do I go to tell the story? It's funny how life is kind of connected with a series of events and things that happen. If somebody had told me 15 years ago that I'd be where I am today, I would have laughed at them. In fact, if somebody had told me 10 years ago, I still would have laughed at them, and I probably still would have laughed at them 5 years ago. And that's the crazy industry that we're in the e-commerce space. It's exciting, but nobody really knows exactly what it's going to look like even in 5 years from now. My journey as far as e-commerce began out of desperation. I used to run a weight loss clinic, or several clinics here in Melbourne, which were quite successful until The Biggest Loser came along and suddenly started telling people that losing weight was all about boot camp and not eating. And the whole thing went to pieces. Our clinic shut down, and there was a whole stack of others around the country, not just the ones that we were involved with, that all shut down. Out of desperation, I didn't have a job. I had a young family, had a young baby that had just been born a couple of months earlier. And all I could think of was I've got to find something and sell it on eBay. That was the first thought that came to my head. So long story short, that ended up being reasonably successful. I was working probably 2 to 3 nights a week and turning over maybe, $30,000, $40,000 a year, which for a part-time thing certainly helped to pay the bills on top of the work that I was doing as well by then. Then the job that I was in, I lost that job. Kind of knew it was coming, but it's never a pleasant thing when you lose a job. And I sat down at that stage and said, well, if I could choose the perfect job in the world, what would it look like? And so I wrote down a list of things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to be able to work from home sometimes. I wanted to work with a variety of different businesses. I didn't just want to be stuck in one office, working on one business. Do a little bit of consulting, travel perhaps interstate, overseas. There was a whole list of things that I wrote down, and then I read the list a few times and put it away. And it wasn't until about 4 months later, when I'd been working at eBay for about a month or two, that I stumbled across the list again and went, geez, it's everything here. So
Power of lists, eh?
It was quite an interesting realization that actually I'd ended up doing a job that I enjoyed. So I worked for eBay for about 5 years. Initially, I was doing business development work where we were working with some of eBay's largest sellers to help them to increase their product selection, improve their competitiveness, help them to sell more. I had worked in a bookkeeping and business advisory type role in previous businesses, so that was kind of straightforward for me. But I found it really interesting through that experience that a lot of the people that I was dealing with, a lot of the sellers that I was dealing with, didn't really see themselves as retailers. And it was a big focus of eBay at the time to try and get sellers, as they called them, to start to be more retail-like, as eBay called it, which I thought was quite amusing. The reality is that when you're selling online brand new products, you are a retailer. And so I sort of coined the phrase accidental retailer, because a lot of these guys didn't realize that they were retailers, but they were. And some of them were turning over millions of dollars. So that was an interesting realization for me. I actually got to do the onboarding training for eBay for a number of the larger retailers like Officeworks, Target, 3M, Fishpond. There was a whole bunch of them that launched on eBay where I did their onboarding training for them. I moved into the role of seller education manager, which is kind of a logical move for me to make. And then I lost the position through redundancy in about 2015, so it's about 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
When I left eBay, I thought, I didn't really quite know how to get consulting clients. I just wanted to do a bit of consulting. It was primarily in the eBay space. Back then, eBay was the only marketplace, really. And so a lot of the consulting work that I did was around the eBay space, how to improve on eBay, reviewing people's stores and seeing where they could improve. And then, of course, 2017, Catch launched. Amazon launched in Australia. And so, the marketplaces have kind of gone nuts from there. What we do today is effectively probably 3 or 4 different key areas that we do. And this has sort of been an evolutionary journey as well. But we do web design for e-commerce. We work primarily with the Neato Maripost platform.
Yep.
We do a lot of data work for e-commerce. So this is creating product records, perhaps taking product records from a supplier and putting them into the right format to be able to use online, and also optimizing those to be able to use across multiple marketplaces as well as through your website, Google, and so on. Another area that we've also focused on is in the automotive category. We didn't go looking for this, it kind of came looking for us, but automotive fitment, or when you're trying to sell parts and accessories online for vehicles, motorcycles and cars, it's a very data heavy job. And because of that data angle of it, our merchant services team do a lot of work in the automotive space. So that's a big area of what we do. And we've also been trying to solve the problem of fitment without getting too technical about it now, just to make it quicker, more affordable, because it's a very tedious and complex process. It's not really something you can automate. It kind of needs a human brain, to be applied to it. And then finally, the last thing that we launched last year was, actually a bit over a year ago now, but a year and a half ago, was our own e-commerce platform as a unified commerce solution called Zealous Connect, to allow retailers to not just sell on a website, but to sell through multiple marketplaces, multiple websites if they need. We've got several clients that are in that position. Sell wholesale B2B and also direct to consumer B2C through the one website or through multiple, even dealing with websites across different countries, different currencies and things like that. So that's been pretty exciting. That's pretty much what we do today.
It's quite a journey that you've been on.
Yeah, it has been. Right. I don't think it's over.
Yeah.
Like I said, nobody knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I've started my agency like 9 months ago, and it's amazing how things evolve just in that short space of time.
Yeah.
I've got some questions here for you. So my next one is some tips on how you can conduct a successful website migration. So for those people who are watching, or a redesign or a development project, whatever it happens to be, and some of the pitfalls to watch out for that you've seen come up time and again during your time doing these sorts of projects.
Yeah, look, it's not for the faint-hearted, if I can say it that way. Look, back in the day, I remember building a website of my own, and back, I'm talking 20 years ago, nobody really knew what a website was for. People weren't buying things online at that stage, and so I just had pictures of myself and all the things that I liked. Pretty stupid. I mean, Facebook came along and sort of did a much better job of that than I did. When we're talking about migrating a website, there's a number of different scenarios involved. The overarching thing that I would say is you can't go into that sort of thing unless you own it as the client yourself. If you're the merchant, you need to own this yourself. You cannot just take on an agency, no matter how good their reputation is, how well they've been referred, and then just think that somehow they're going to magically solve all these issues for you. You've got to actually own it at your end and get your head under the hood and really understand it. I think that's probably the first thing that I'd say is really important in that process. Migrating websites, a couple of things. So firstly, they might have already had a website that was just informational, non-transactional. They weren't selling products. Now they're moving into selling products. That's not necessarily, it's a very logical thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, but it's not necessarily an easy thing to do without a lot of education, a lot of learning. I would say that the best way to get that project right is to go and look at a bunch of other websites, go and buy stuff on a bunch of other websites or even marketplaces. Take a note of what you like and what you don't like. Take a note of where you find it hard to find things and where you find it easy to find things, or what makes the difference between those things. We're dealing with a million pixels on a screen, on a desktop, or even less on a mobile phone. And that's the only medium that business is communicating with you to actually make those buying decisions. It doesn't have another person on the other side of the screen looking out at you to see what you're looking at the time, to work out, whether they should move things around. And all of that stuff has to be coded in and programmed into the website before the customer even gets there. I mean, you can't sort of redevelop it as you go. There's a few AI products out there that do some smart things, but essentially you've got to pre-prepare everything for every scenario. So that would be going from a non-transactional site to a transactional site. Understanding that customer experience is important. The second one would be where you're going from one platform to another. So maybe you've had a website, you've been trading for a while, you've been selling okay, but you want to move to a different platform. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why people will go from one platform to another. Some of those reasons are that they've outgrown a platform. It wasn't really designed to be as big as their business has become, or maybe it doesn't have some of the features that are kind of more in vogue or more popular and just hasn't caught up. In which case, replatforming, it's a big exercise. It's not something you do in a couple of weeks. It is something that takes several months. The thing is, one platform deals with data in a certain way, stores data a certain way. Another platform stores it in a different way, and that's where the biggest challenge comes in. If you've got a very logical, structured mind, you can probably pull that data out, have a good look at it, work out the format it needs to go into the other one to upload it, and do the work in a spreadsheet yourself. We do a lot of that work. A lot of the clients that we've worked with kind of just throw their hands up and go, this is too complex, too hard. Can you please just do it for us?
Yeah.
Again, this is where it comes back to really owning that within your business as well. You can't just push that across to an agency and say, you just go and do it and expect that it's going to be perfect, because at the end of the day, nobody knows your business like you do as a retailer. And so some of the products, and I know because I've looked at this sort of data, some of the products I look at and I go, I don't even know what this is. How am I supposed to know if the picture actually matches or if it's been described right or which words we should use in the title? And that can be an issue. So again, even if you are getting an agency or somebody like our merchant services team to do that kind of data work or do that migration, you've got to have somebody internally that's accessible, that can actually respond to that information as they go, just to make that a good, clear process. As I said, a migration from one platform to another is a pretty big exercise. I won't necessarily go through, how to decide which platform is right. That's probably a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Suffice to say that you just want to think about kind of future-proofing your business. Think about the functions that you got today. Think about what's popular. Think about what other people are doing, and then make sure that the platform that you're moving to is something you're not going to need to move again in another year's time, because it's quite a long process and you don't want to be doing it too often. The other type of project that we often do, as you mentioned, is like a redesign. So maybe your website's been done on maybe a WordPress, not WordPress, say WooCommerce or Shopify or BigCommerce or Nido or something like that. Had a website, it's working fine, it's got all the functions there, but we now want some new functions on there. We want it to be laid out in a different way. Maybe we're rebranding because we didn't really think about branding before we just put a website up with some nice pictures. That's a bit bigger of a process. Sometimes we deal with clients that actually have their own sort of design agency or marketing agency, which will have some very, very clear views about how they want that brand to be presented, both in terms of words, images, position, experience, all of those sorts of things. For those that don't, we build that into our scoping process in the beginning to really sometimes challenge them on their logo if it really doesn't make sense. Well, we've dealt with clients where their logo or their business name was very restrictive, but the products that they were selling weren't really related. And so that's an interesting discussion. So it's not just a case of saying, do a nice website for me, make it look better. Oftentimes there's more fundamentals in the business that need to be looked at. So it's a little bit bigger of an exercise. Pitfalls to watch out for, I think really, again, just as I've said before, if you don't have somebody in the business that's owning it, you're not going to pay attention to it. It's not going to be done properly. And it's starting to get so competitive in this e-commerce space that if you're not really doing it properly, you're not going to get the cut through. People might come to your website because you've got great SEO or great marketing, but then they go there and then after 2 or 3 pages of trying and finding it too hard to find things, they just disappear. And it's too easy to go and find another website. So you got to own it.
This wasn't one of my questions, but something just popped into my head was the importance of good search. I know that was one of those things that I always was trying to improve when I had my own e-commerce store, but are you finding that search is one of those things that sometimes gets overlooked when on-site search?
Right, yeah. Again, each platform sort of has its own nuances as to how it searches. If you think about search in a very rational way, all search is the platform is going looking for whatever words you've typed in, whatever combination of letters and numbers you've typed in, and trying to look for it in certain places in the data that sits behind about all the products. With most of these platforms, the default search just simply looks through the title of the product. So if you don't have words in the title or the name of the product, which actually relates to the product, search isn't going to be able to find it. It's a little bit different to Google. Google will actually sort of look over the whole page. Yep. And anytime a number of words appear several times, it starts to figure, well, that's probably an important word because it's appearing a few times. You've got your H1, your H2 tags to sort of indicate a hierarchy, if you like, of which words are most important. So Google can sort of get that. Most of your on-site searches on the e-commerce platforms don't do that. It's probably something that will evolve in time, I would say. But a lot of the platforms do have things like the product name as a H1 tag in the back end anyway. So they're kind of taking care of part of the Google side of it. It's just that the on-site searches don't of themselves usually do that. If I step back and think about it, not so much from a technical point of view, but think about it from a customer point of view. Sometimes when we're running a business, we're so close to it that we know where everything is. We know how things are called. I've had clients say, oh, this is what people call it in our industry. It's like, that's great. So all the customers that have never heard of you before and have never looked at this stuff before, they come and land on your website. They can't find what they want because you're not using the normal consumer language. So it's really what I'm getting at here is that it's not just a function of the search technically or its actual capabilities. It's really as much a product of the data and the way that that's been set up and structured about the products as to how effective that search is going to be. There are some great products out there that have sort of algorithmic-based or AI-based search functions to go and look through a whole lot more data across the website. There's some great add-ons that you can do on pretty much any platform. But yeah, search is really important. And it's really about reducing the friction from the time the customer lands on your website to the time they get to checkout, that they feel like it's just been, like floating on a fast-flowing river in a boat. It just moves there, rather than them feeling like they're actually rock climbing up a big mountain where it's kind of hard. because the harder it is, the more likely the person is to just disappear.
Okay, cool. So here's another question for you. How has a failure or an apparent failure set you up for later success? So I guess it's more of a sort of a personal question for you. And do you have a favorite failure of yours when you look back over your time in e-commerce?
Certainly, I've had some failures in business, full stop. They're more generic, not so much specifically relating to e-commerce. In e-commerce, I think probably the biggest failure or mistake that I've made is saying yes to too many things, if I can say it that way. And you're laughing, which means you've probably done the same. When you first start a business, you kind of do say yes to everything because that's, you've got to get enough work, and that's what happens. As you start to hit a bit of scale, you start to choose what you enjoy the most, or where the most profit lies, or what makes sense to the brand and the business. And so over the past 5-6 years that we've been running Zealous, I've definitely had to trim off services or offerings that no longer really fit within the core business. So that's just something that you do. Saying no to a customer is not easy, especially when, I sort of feel that I want them to succeed. We don't try to build customers that depend on us. We try to actually build customers that can actually run their businesses and be self-sufficient. That's just the way that I like to do it. Sometimes that can be a double-edged sword, though, because the customer can end up actually relying on you, even though you're trying to hand everything over to them and trying to get them to learn, and sometimes they don't. And then just the desire to actually have them succeed sometimes means that you're saying yes to things and just kind of just doing it because, oh, look, it won't take me long, we'll just do it. And I'm finding that is a bit of a mistake, because sometimes it's setting up clients to think that we're always available, almost as a charity, to just go and do whatever that they need because it's only a little thing. It's not going to take that long. So that's been a bit of an issue that I've learned from. Not a specific incident. It's just really a general attitude about really honing in and focusing on what's actually best for the business and ultimately best for the clients.
Yeah, I think you can apply that principle in any business. I see it a lot where it's inevitable. There's sort of the initial scope, or what you initially, wanted to do with your business, ends up creeping and, broadening out. And you think, well, I need to add in this sort of product set so that we can build additional sales that way. And sometimes that can result in you being sort of mediocre at a whole lot of things rather than really good at a specific subset of things. So
I totally agree with that. The other thing that we've also done to sort of try and limit that creep in project is that we tend to have a smorgasbord of prices rather than, you tell us and we'll quote you. We try as much as we can to have fixed price. Now, when you have fixed price for different tasks, you have to specify very clearly what's included and what isn't. Sometimes the customer or the client will know what that means, and sometimes they won't. So granted, sometimes they won't know that you've included 30 of something, but they needed 200. They don't know the difference. But we've found that that's kind of reduced the friction in working with clients, where they kind of just have this magical view that somehow we're just going to make this thing mystically appear out of nowhere. And again, trying to structure it in that way so that there's checklists. These are the things that we have to do. There's the 5 things. Let us know when you've done those, rather than having open-ended conversation, which needs to be reinvented each time you speak to a different client. So standardizing and systemizing things has been something that I've tried to do right from the beginning, even when it was just me. And now we've got a team of over 30 people in the business. So different people in the business can actually be focused on certain tasks and certain processes rather than me having to deal with everything. But yeah, it definitely helps to be structured in that way.
Yeah. So in the last 5 years, what new belief or behavior or habit has most improved your life?
That's deep.
I always get people on this one.
Yeah, it's deep. Look, this sounds cliche to say, but work-life balance, right? I say work-life balance. We're in a world now where most of us are working from home, if not all the time, at least for a majority of the time. Not everyone's cut out to do that. Okay. Some people really struggle with the lack of social interaction and contact, even if it's just incidental as they're at work. For me personally, I don't mind. I just get behind a computer. I'll just keep going for all hours. And I need to watch myself, because sometimes I'll do 10, 12, 16, 17, 18 hours straight, forgetting to drink, forgetting to eat, forgetting to do all sorts of things because I'm just so focused on what's right in front of me. And you might relate to that. So a lot of people in this sort of space, I think, get a bit like that. And particularly those that are very technical or very focused on, solving problems, as it were. For me, it's been a case of, because I've got family. They also need my time and my attention, of course, and I want to spend time with them. So I've had to really be fairly brutal on my time particularly when it comes to weekends. Occasionally I have to work a weekend. I try not to. And generally speaking, I've been fairly good that when I close my laptop, whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever time it is in the afternoon or evening, that's it. I don't open it back up again. I just, even if in the back of my mind, I didn't do that, I forgot to do that, I will actually then on my mobile phone send an email to myself to remind me the next morning when I get in there that I've got to go and do it, rather than jumping in and doing it now. So I've had to be fairly brutal on that, because the reality is you can burn yourself out, and it's happened to me several times. It's like business comes in waves. When you first start, you haven't got enough work, and then you get enough and you're like, this is good, I might expand to this and expand to that, and then suddenly you end up with too much. And then you end up in this state of, I won't say chaos, but like stress, like really intense stress. It's just like you get very stressed. I can't get it all done in that time, and then the frustration sets in. And then of course, you lower your guard. You don't do things properly, and the work suffers, and then you're back where you started. So dealing with those waves to get to that point, knowing your own body, knowing your own limits, knowing your own needs for recharging, and actually getting time away from the screen or any screen to actually just go and breathe, get some sunlight, get some air, and actually take that time out to keep your own health and well-being kind of in check. I think that's been something that's been really important for me.
That's great. I think it's something for everybody in that. The last question I have for you is, what are some bad recommendations that you hear in your area of professional expertise?
How long have you got?
What would you say the most common ones are?
Yeah, look, so I might go to the marketplaces on this one. We deal with a lot of clients that sell on marketplaces as well as perhaps on their own website. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Yes, you're reaching customers, you're selling products, but on your own website, you make a mistake, nobody can really see it. Unless the customer goes and has a crack at you in social media or leaves a bad Google review, at the end of the day, nobody really sees what happens to all the other customers on a website. Marketplaces are very different. Marketplaces are very transparent and very open. So some of the bad recommendations that I've seen around is, don't worry about that. eBay won't notice, or Amazon won't care. Just do it anyway. Like the number of people that I come across that maybe know the rules or the regulations on the market, or the policies, I should say, on the marketplaces, and kind of say, don't do it. These people do it. You should just do it as well. It's all very well to say, I speed in my car and I don't get caught, therefore I will keep speeding. It's another thing to drive past, also to be caught for speeding, and then have somebody else drive past at speeding and say, but hang on, but they're speeding. Why, but this does apply very much in the marketplaces area. The fact that you're not caught doesn't mean it's right. And the fact that you are caught and others get away with it doesn't mean that it's right for them either. And so I've seen a lot of people often say, we just did this, we just did that, trying to get around the rules. I'm not a stickler for the rules in that sense. I think that we should all be adult enough to kind of work out where the spirit of things lie, and to actually do things at the end of the day that are going to be good for customers. I do understand how compelling it can be at times when you are in a position of, low income or low sales, that you might want to bend the rules a bit just to try and get a bit ahead. And it's very easy for me to sit here having been on both the eBay side and also on the outside of eBay, to say it ain't worth it. Yeah, I've seen businesses that have been stopped midstream. There's a $3-4 million turnover businesses a year just literally stopped dead, kicked off eBay because they didn't play by the rules. So these are real risks. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I would see. As a second one that I also see quite often, and this is not, I suppose it's a recommendation. I see a lot of people in the e-commerce space, and this probably applies across a lot of different business sectors, to be honest, seeing other people successful and thinking if they just copy them, some of that success will rub off onto them and they'll be successful too. The number of people that I've seen pop up and say, look, how do I set up a business on Amazon or a website? I've got a drop shipper that's going to drop ship everything for me. They're going to supply all the data. And I get the impression they think that somehow making $1 million is as easy as just sitting in bed in your pajamas and just letting everyone else do the work. That ain't true. That's absolutely not true. Because if that was the case, 500 other people would have already done it, and therefore you've got competition, and that's not going to work. So I'm not a big fan of the Me Too business model. I don't think it works. I don't mind the fact that people might be selling similar products or in a similar category or competing with each other and selling similar things. That's fine. But find a point of difference. That's the first rule of business anyway. There's plenty of other agencies out there that deal with data or do web design. What's our point of difference compared to them? And really honing in on that and asking that question. To be honest, I didn't ask that question of myself for probably the first 2 to 3 years of running Zealous. We'd already grown to about 5 or 6 people by that stage, but I'd not really actually distilled what we did down into words and to really focus on what it actually was. So, yeah, that was a bit of realization. But I think it's a bad idea to just copy other people, and I think it's a bad idea to think that you can just run around the fringes of a marketplace and think you get away with it forever, because it usually doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right. That's useful. Well, I don't have any other questions for you, Tim, and I really appreciate you taking time out today, because I know you're a busy guy. So I guess in closing, for anyone who's, fairly new or struggling with their e-commerce business, is there anything you sort of might be able to offer them, even words of encouragement?
Yeah, look, it's for a start, e-commerce is definitely the place to be. It's the only sector of retail which is really seriously growing. We've been through COVID and it just went nuts. Yes, it's going to drop off a little bit as those numbers sort of come off the boil, but all of the stats that I'm seeing out there are indicating that e-commerce is still going to be, or is going to be, an increasing segment of overall retail. What's happened up until prior to COVID was most of the people playing in the e-commerce space were marketplace sellers that just branched out and got bigger. Look at your Kogans, look at your Catches, look at your My Deals, and so on. They all started off life as an eBay seller and then just got bigger and bigger. Now they've got their own websites. Now they're publicly listed, and they're great success stories. There's only so many people that can actually do that, so that's not what everyone's going to do. But what's happened with COVID is suddenly the numbers, or the proportion of e-commerce to overall retail, has grown to the point, I think at one stage in Victoria it was around about 40%. It was a ridiculously high number. All of a sudden the major retailers have kind of gone, we thought that was a fad. Looks like it's not a fad. We better put a line in our budget for this. And the numbers that they're putting in their budget are not a couple of $100 or $1,000. They are millions of dollars. So the big guys are already here. They're not coming. They're already here. Amazon has probably accelerated that conversation and that thinking within retailers, because Amazon was presented by the Australian media as a bit of a threat to retail in Australia. So a lot of retailers have kind of paid attention to that and thought, well, yeah, okay, how do we protect ourselves against, having our sales cannibalized and taken away? So the message that I'd have for people that might be new to e-commerce is take your time, learn it well. Don't try and, build Rome in a day. It's not going to happen. But it all comes back to customer experience. I've seen a number of posts by others in LinkedIn, which have been really, really good, starting to talk about how that SEO in the traditional technical sense is starting to really migrate because of the way that Google is actually starting to view websites. It's starting to migrate towards the websites that have the best experiences are the ones that actually win, not the ones that have all the keywords. Yep. That's a really interesting concept. And I totally agree with that. And when our computer algorithms and our technology is smart enough to actually perceive the difference in a good customer experience and a bad customer experience, then all the SEO hackers out there, if I can say it that way, that go and put all these smart keywords in and do all these clever things to trick Google, that's all going to go by the wayside. So go and look at other websites that are competitors to yours. Note down what you like and what you don't like and why. Get other people to go through that experience. Don't actually buy anything, but actually go all the way through to checkout with something that you would buy, and ask them how easy it was to find it. What was it, clear and straightforward as to how to actually go and buy it? Did it look confusing? Was it hard? Because the more friction you can reduce, the more you can make it intuitive and flow, the more people will stay on your site. At the end of the day, it's about conversion, not about traffic. You're better to get 10 people to your website and have half of them convert than to get 10 times that many and only have a small percentage convert, even if it's the same number of sales. It's the conversion, which is really the important thing. So yeah, that's probably my tip. Focus on conversion and just focus on making a really good customer experience.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much, Tim. I really appreciate you taking the time out to have a chat today. For anyone who's, wants to ask you any questions or get in touch, is the best way to do that through your website?
Yeah, through the website, just zealous.com.au, ZELLIS. We spell things differently.
All right. No worries. Okay, mate. We'll leave it there. We'll be in touch again soon, I'm sure. Thanks again.
Cheers. You have a good day.
Yep. See you, mate.
Yeah.
Bye.